Is this the greatest video feedback generator in the world, would you say?
Oh, definitely. I would say definitely.
I haven't seen anything like this.
I've never seen anything that incorporates human movement like this. People have done video
Yeah.
feedback fractals before. That's nothing new. You can do it with a computer. You can do it with many different ways, but I've not seen it have this organic motion.
Yeah,
or have the
yeah.
complexity, because like life that these images look like, the device has evolved in an organic way also. Because the way it is now, I would never say, okay, I'm going to build it like this, like the human body. You wouldn't build a human body from scratch like it is. It's because of the iterations over time.
Right.
I kept adding things.
Dave Blair is a videographer, photographer, and expert in the art of video feedback. We'll discuss his construction of the greatest video feedback generator of all time, which he's called the God Machine. Along the way, we'll touch on Douglas Hofstadter's Godel, Escher, Bach, plus potential connections with Biomorphs and Spacetime dynamics. If you got this far, please hit that subscribe button, and I hope you enjoy our conversation.
All right, so Dave, thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Very much looking forward to our conversation. I discovered your work, I think it was about a year ago, when I first stumbled upon your video feedback art on YouTube, the Light Herder project that you've been working on. And I was blown away by it, wrote it down, wrote down your name. I was like, I got to reach out to this guy at some point and try to chat with him. So thank you again for jumping on. And I think it would be awesome. I think the main point of conversation today will be around video feedback. And I think it really helped the audience to learn about, let's set the stage a little bit. Like, what is video feedback? Can you tell us about it? Can you tell us even how you got into it?
Sure. Video feedback is a lot like audio feedback, or if you have a microphone, everyone's familiar with this, and you get too close to the speaker, the sound comes out of the speaker and it goes into the microphone and it goes out the speaker very quickly, and it very quickly evolves into a because it's just going so fast. But if you could slow that down and you have a delay there and you said hello, and then it took a second and it came out of the speaker, hello, and then it took a second, you would hear hello, 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 hello. And it would be something with more of a form than just a tone. And that's kind of what video feedback is, where you point a camera at a monitor that's displaying what the camera sees. So if you point the camera at something and you see it on the TV or monitor, and then you move the camera over to the monitor, then you see that monitor in the monitor, in the monitor, in the monitor, kind of like two mirrors in a dressing room, where it kind of recedes into infinity. And so it kind of receding like that. And if you zoom in with the lens, or if you move the camera closer, you'll see all those screens, starting with the one in the back, and they all come forwards. And when they're all on the same plane, you have this crazy emergent behavior, basically, where instead of seeing monitors and monitors, or if you had a twist, like a little twist of a hallway like that, you'll start to see actual spinning shapes and colors. And this was big kind of in the very beginning of when there were video cameras. People have been doing this. You could see this a lot in 70s videos, music videos. You could see it a lot of like keyed behind bands, just swirling colors, like in a Jimi Hendrix video or something. And if you change the tilt of the camera, you'll get more of a rotation of these spinning colors. If you have it untilted, it'll be more of a kind of a blob, kind of just existing in the middle of the screen. If you kind of zoom in more, it'll kind of come out at you like this. And if you zoom out, it'll kind of go away. And one of the important things is being able to control this image, because just like the audio feedback, it can very easily go boo, which in the audio case is just all white, or it can just go to silence, which would be like you're moving too far away from the speaker to get feedback at all. That would be going to black. And the interesting things happen between too bright, all white, and all black. It's kind of like this delicate middle space where just basically everything interesting in the universe happens, between either too hot for life to exist, let's say, or too frozen. It's like just this little middle area that is very delicate and it's hard to maintain. And the way you maintain it with video feedback is with the controls on the TV or monitor. And so that's why it's usually done with an old-fashioned TV set, because you had those analog knobs: hue, contrast, saturation, and brightness, where you turn the knob and the screen gets brighter or darker. A lot of people haven't even seen a TV that looks like that. Modern TVs have those controls, but they're all on screen, where you have a little menu and it has a little bar that goes tick, 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 tick. Well, you can't do that with video feedback, because not only is it not quick enough to change, but you'll see that menu item come up, and you'd see brightness menu bar become part of the feedback. So you got to get an old TV set with these knobs, and you kind of ride the brightness between going too bright and going away. And you could turn up the color, or you could turn it down, whether you want black and white kind of feedback, or if you want very colorful feedback. You can also introduce an image to this feedback loop. Let's just stick with the camera and the TV.
Sure.
If you put your finger in between, so now the camera doesn't just see the TV anymore, it sees the TV and your finger in front of it. That finger will be propagated, because now the camera sees the finger in the monitor, and then it sees the finger in that monitor, and you'll get like finger out into infinity. Or if there's a rotation, you'll see the finger move around like this. And you could, if you move your finger, you'll be interacting with this feedback, because the feedback will kind of come off of your finger. It'll kind of affect what's going on the screen. So there's a way of going from an image that is just the image, and then switching to feedback, so that image will turn into feedback. And I first started doing this when I had a job 25 years or so ago in an advertising agency, making car commercials, like the worst kind of regional and local car commercials here in Fort Lauderdale. But it was kind of before there was computer editing, of course, but it was before you could really easily finish projects on the Avid. It took a huge amount of rendering. It was more for offline, kind of like you did it on the computer, and then you moved to a room like I had, which was called the online room. Not online like on the internet, but online meaning a computer was attached, and the computer didn't do the editing, it just kept track of the edits. So this online suite is tape to tape based, and the tapes that I was using were digital tapes, but it was still linear tape, but it was completely digital. So there was very little to really no signal loss between generations. And the mixer I was using, the switcher, was digital too. So you can go between the decks and you make your edits using this kind of tape to tape method. But I would sometimes have the engineer go into the tape room and take the output of the color corrector and remove that and put the output back into the input of the switcher. And now you could do video feedback in this digital kind of online suite, but it was the cleanest video feedback ever because it was lossless. So you could have, so this is what I noticed, that you could go from an image, like let's say an image of a dog, and that it's getting that from the tape, then switch to the input is now the output of the device. So that output is now, the dog is there, but it's feedback. So that dog is now not coming from the tape, but it's coming from the output of the mixer. And because it's lossless, that dog, you can't tell when you've switched over like that, and it looks like it's just coming from the tape, but that dog only exists in the wires of the system. It's not coming from anywhere except from itself. And if you did if you put a little rotation through the DVE, which is kind of like a device that did rotation or enlargements of the video, if you put a little rotation on that, the dog would just go smear like this and very slowly turn into just like a smudge, but it would take quite a while. Or if you put a little enlargement on it, it would come forwards, and it would take a long time because it was lossless, but it would slowly turn into this video feedback kind of just amorphous shapes. So you can do that in a room. You could do that without this clean lossless room by having some way of switching between one input and feedback. And so you'll see a lot in my my video feedback images going into feedback. And that's because I have a switcher that will switch between any kind of input that I have from the phone, like that dog, and and that dog is on the monitor and the camera looking at the monitor, and it switches from the input from the phone to the camera looking at the monitor. And it's not lossless, so it very quickly goes into feedback, but you could see the shape going into this feedback form, or in the case of the device, a fractal form. So I have some examples to show that. But
yeah, do you want to show them?
Yeah,
that'd be great.
Yeah, I think I know I'm kind of like blowing past a lot of questions, maybe, but
yeah, I got a lot of questions. I mean, well, first of all, while you're setting that up, so was this like a happy accident that you had 25 years ago? I mean, was it something you knew about going into it, or did you just kind of discover it out of thin air?
Well, I first heard about video feedback in high school when I was reading the Godel, Escher, Bach by Hofstadter. And that book kind of changed my thinking about a lot of things. It's all about recursiveness and self-referential things. And a lot of it was over my head, and it probably still is. But the ideas were, the ideas were there. And I doubt I read it cover to cover, but I did read parts of it that I found interesting. And he talks about video feedback, and I wanted to try it, but I didn't have a, we're talking, I graduated high school in '87, so this was a while ago. And I didn't have access to a camera until UC Santa Cruz. And it was, what I was doing was I was taking, I didn't have money to buy CDs, which were still pretty expensive then, or a CD player. So I would borrow all my dorm mates' CDs and someone's CD player, and I would record them to hi-fi VHS. And you can get 6 to 8 hours of almost or practically CD quality sound to hi-fi VHS. You know, it records it on the video signal. I mean, it's like basically CD quality. So while I was recording all these CDs, I had the ability to record a video track too. And so when I was recording like something off of a record player, I would point the camera at the record player so you could just watch a record spin while you're listening to the music. But then I started thinking about doing the video feedback, and I remembered what I read. So now I was recording like Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin and all that stuff. I would be playing for hours with pointing this camera that was a friend of mine's down the hall at my little Sony Trinitron TV that was happened to have the knobs that could do good video feedback. And so I got pretty good at doing video feedback because of these hours and hours that I played around with it while recording music. And it was usually just the camera on a tripod, and you could move the camera position, but it was kind of like it was set, and then you play around with it, and then you'd change the camera position, then you play around with it. There was no smooth way to change the position of the camera. So when I had a job in 2003 working in a guest house in Provincetown, Massachusetts, and I had this little kind of almost in the basement quarters where I was living. That's where the people who worked in the guest house lived. And there happened to be an old TV set with the knobs on it. And in 2003, it was almost kind of rare to see that even then, because even standard definition TVs were going to more of a menu based. I mean, it took a really old TV to have the knobs. And at that point, I did have a camera. I had a little Sony Mavica, which took pictures and put it on a little DVD. And it was a standard definition camera. But it had like a little like output that I can go to RCA input to the TV. And I decided that I wanted to make much more intricate video feedback. And I was thinking, how can I move the camera smoothly, not only around like this, but closer and further away from the screen? And I went to the hardware store and I just kind of looked around and came up with ideas. And I settled on here I could share the screen here. This is the lightherder.com website. It's at the very bottom here.
Cool.
And so here, do you see that?
I do, yeah.
Okay. Do you see my cursor?
I do, yeah.
Okay,
I
so
can see it.
the camera is in this box,
Mhm.
and there's some kind of silicone or something kind of grease in there, so it can
Mhm.
this dowel can move through this tube very smoothly. And here's the TV, and it will rotate. Here's like a little yoke here, and the output of this camera goes from wires to this TV here, and that was the first video feedback device. It's attached to this low ceiling here,
Mhm.
and it made things like this here. So it's very simple.
Mhm.
And I would listen to music, and music much like this while I was making it. It's kind of a meditation.
Sure.
And sometimes the music that's on these videos is right off the camera mic. Sometimes, a lot of times I'm adding it later.
Yeah.
But I came to learn later that this kind of feedback is this kind of liney thing is made from a very auto sharpening of cheaper cameras. And it kind of ends up making a line, which was cool for this feedback here. And it makes it kind of persist easily and not disappear. When I first started doing video feedback with other cameras, more expensive cameras that didn't have this sharpening, it didn't make these lines, and it was harder to maintain the feedback. And that was a whole, I'll talk about that later, but that was a whole thing to discover, why is my feedback not looking like this anymore? But here you could see, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, can you give us a sense of, like, so while you're controlling it, what are some of the major, you said sort of the positioning of the camera, right? The on the axis, go like moving like this, moving this way, left to right, and then it's positioned towards the screen. What are some of, I guess, the I don't know if you had to rank sort of the sort of modes in which you are sort of doing the work, you're sort of doing the play. Like if you had to say from like top to bottom, what are the most important aspects of that?
Well, for something like this, I would choose a position, and you'll see that it's not getting bigger or smaller. So the camera isn't moving closer or further away. It's kind of the camera has a rotation on it right now, and it's going to slowly turn forever. But I'll change the rotation a little bit, and I'll change kind of what's happening, but there's subtle rotational changes. But the most important thing is changing the brightness, especially on this, because I have the chroma turned down intentionally, so it's not wild and like I wanted to have something different than just the wild spinning colors, which you see so often. So I turned down the color all the way down. So now you'll see. Also on this, I couldn't control the camera. Can you see me while I'm on screen sharing, or just the screen sharing?
I can see both. Yeah.
Okay. So I couldn't control the knobs and the camera at the same time, because I'd be up at the TV controlling the knobs or back controlling the camera. And that's something that I have changed on the most recent iteration, where I can do both at the same time. But so I'll do something here with the brightness, and then I'll go back and change the position of the camera. But you'll see here that the pattern is breaking from this kind of thing here, and it's going to see it's breaking there. It's because I very subtly had turned the brightness down. Something else that's important to know about video feedback, and this really illustrates that, is that when you have this camera looking at the monitor, and the monitor displays what the camera sees, and the monitor is black, and the camera sees that black monitor, it's going to be black forever, because it sees black, it shows black, sees black, shows black, and until something happens. And this is kind of like my theory for the creation of the universe, basically. But there's nothingness until there's something, and then that something causes there to be something, because there is something. The something perpetuates itself. So this one, there's actually a camera looking at a black screen, and I bring up, and so it's seeing black forever, and I bring up a lighter, and that light from the lighter starts things off, and then you see a pattern, and basically you could think of it as that light from the lighter existing in there forever. It's not obviously the same light, but it can be thought of as the same light in a kind of a philosophical way. So you'll see that lighter here.
Right. You only need the light to get it going, but you can pull away the lighter and it's still going in the cycle. It's still cycling over. Yeah.
And you can also see, you can kind of paint with that. Here he goes.
And what's it like as the person? Oh, sorry. After you.
Well, I was just going to say it exists now because it exists. And that's kind of like how I feel about the universe. There was nothing, something happened, don't know what, but now it exists because it is existing.
Yeah.
What were you going to ask?
I was going to ask, what's it like? I've never done video feedback myself. I would like to play around with it myself. I think it'd be fun. I think it would be a kind of a flow experience to be in there, and you're in control, but you're not in control, right? There's a certain degree to which it's out of your hands, but everything kind of. So it's funny. I've watched a lot of video feedback videos, and the patterns that are forming make sense. It's like I can see that they're following some kind of rule, but I can imagine that as you're making it, there are happy accidents. There are things that surprise you, right? There are probably things that come up. Well, what can you explain to the audience what it's like to be the person behind the creation? Like, what does it feel like? Do you get into a flow state?
Yeah, there's always some kind of surprising thing that happens. And if this video feedback device that's behind me now, it's kind of more complicated because it makes fractals. I'll talk about that. But just a camera looking at a monitor, just the tiniest movement and turn of the camera, or making it upside down or putting it at a 90-degree angle, you're seeing these patterns. And you're right, because as you see them, you get the feeling that this is somehow important. And I was thinking that way back in the late 80s, I was like, someone should study this, because this has something, this is very important somehow. You get these, sometimes you get kind of familiar shapes like that tri kind of like the 3 kind of thing. Depending on how the camera is positioned, you get different numbers of shapes or kind of spokes. So if the camera is straight on, it's just a blob. If the camera is upside down, you kind of have 2 things that go off like this. And then anywhere in between, you'll have 2 things, 3 things, 4 things, kind of the spokes come off. And these spokes will do all sorts of different things depending on your camera settings and your knob settings. You can get just a circle, or you can get circles in circles. You have to be careful of when you have it giving 4 things off, because it can very easily, especially when you're doing very liney video like I just showed, it can very easily create a swastika, which is like found in nature, these shapes, and that is also one. And in fact, I read something in Athens, Ohio, which coincidentally is where I went to college. These kids were doing video feedback on community access TV, and people called in and said they were complaining that there were swastikas, but it was just this natural video feedback. So I always stay away from the 4 spokes, but the 3 are more interesting anyway. And you do definitely get into a meditative state. You can just start playing around with it for hours. You're in a dark room because it needs to be dark so that the lights don't, make a glare on the screen and affect things. And you're listening to music. And especially when I'm doing things with the device there, things get even more emergent with the behaviors, like organic shapes, leaves, and amoebas, and underwater creatures, jellyfish. So
I think
the way that this thing came about was in 2007, I wanted to recreate the thing I made in 2003, but make it better. And so I went to the flea market and I got a old TV set with the knobs, and I built the rig that had the camera and the dowel. But this time I took the knobs the little potentiometers on the TV, and I desoldered them and brought them up to where I was controlling the camera, and rewired them up there. Carefully resoldered them and put them in a box. So then I could move the camera and ride the brightness and the color at the same time. And that created even more possibilities where you can turn the camera and turn down the brightness, and you're always riding that brightness because it always wants to either bloom in or go away. So you're kind of right on that fine edge. Then at that point, I wanted to do HD video feedback, and I even started a Kickstarter to do it. And I knew it would be tricky because HD monitors always have, like the consumer ones, always have the brightness on the on-screen menu.
Right.
There are very expensive color correcting professional monitors that have the analog knobs, and they are like $10,000, $100,000.
$100,000, my God.
Yeah, these are monitors that are used in a color correction facility, let's say, to like color correct to grade a movie or whatever.
Yeah. Sure.
And so I kind of didn't think about it, or I thought about it, but I knew it wasn't possible for years. And then when everyone started doing Zoom, because something happened in the world and people started to do that, I set up my DSLR that I'm using now for my first Zoom meeting, because I think it was a job interview. I wanted it to look nice.
Yeah,
so
it does. It looks great.
But I pointed that at the monitor. I was like, this HD feedback does look really cool. So I was like, maybe I can find a screen that does have those knobs now. So I did like an internet search, and I searched like monitor with knobs, HD, LCD, and I found these production monitors, and I have one, but I forgot to grab it. If you want me to go get one, should I go get it?
If you want, sure. Yeah.
All right. So I found these monitors online that were, they are HD. They do have these knobs.
Sure.
Hue, contrast, saturation, brightness. And these are field monitors. I would guess maybe they're from maybe 15 years ago. You could see this one's kind of in bad shape. But I got these used at Adorama and B&H, kind of here and there, eBay, for about $250. I found somewhere where they were selling these, the new price. It was hard to find, but it was around $4,000.
Oh.
So like when this was state of the art, which it's definitely not anymore, it's heavy, it's LCD, it's not, it's bulky.
Right.
But it is a professional. It takes this giant kind of Anton Bauer battery. I mean, these are for real production shoots, and you'll see these all the time still. Like if you see behind the scenes or directors looking at monitors, you'll often see them looking at one of these Panasonics.
Oh, cool.
And so I had to figure out kind of how to power it, because it takes this giant battery or like this XLR type of input off of a camera. So I had to get this connector that adapted to just a regular like power adapter kind of thing, and get the right voltage and wattage. And then when it arrived, there was I was planning on desoldering the potentiometers like I did in 2007, and bringing these up towards the head of the device over there. But when it arrived, it was really nice, because this is a separate box that unscrews. And so this whole thing comes off with the knobs. So I didn't have to do any unsoldering. And so if you see on the videos on the device, you'll see a line of these up towards where I am.
Right.
And so I know
you have all the
like
control
on the device here, there's a monitor here, monitor here, monitor here, monitor here. There's one over here. And I have a row of all these to control each one of those. So I had to basically just splice into the short cable lengthen it, and I had to find a kind of a 10 or 12 or whatever this is wire cable. So that was perfect.
It's awesome.
But
I'll go for it. Yeah. Sorry.
Well, I also wanted to do. Oh, there's DuPont.
Oh, hey.
He's a chubby Shih Tzu. So I also wanted to do this time around not just feedback, but I wanted to do fractals. And part of the inspiration for this was also from that tape-to-tape online room back in 2000, where when I was doing feedback in that room, if you applied some kind of effect that kind of did a twist or something to the video, you would get these shapes that kind of had tentacle arms, and they kind of go off. And when you did a little twist on this DVE, which changed the rotation of the video, it would this little rotation would propagate through the tentacles and give this emergent behavior where it would look like it was underwater and looked like a real living thing. And that's because although the room was lossless, so each time the signal went through, there was no degradation. There was a frame delay from each pass.
Sure.
So when it makes like a little segment, then the next segment is a frame later. So any movement is going to propagate through these. And that's exactly like how little segmented creatures, walk. They kind of like, it's these simple little movements that create complicated behaviors and bigger movements. And so I wanted to create that kind of tentacle thing. And I wanted to do it in I didn't want to use like computers, and I didn't want to do it with the equipment I used in that room. I wanted to do it with just analog and mechanical means. So I didn't come up with this method. I knew that you can create fractals with the video feedback with a mirror, which I'd done, where you put a mirror next to your monitor, and you kind of need this mirror image thing to make not just video feedback, but a true fractal. But I didn't want to do it like that. So I found this thing on this website from, I think, 97 or something, called Sweet and Fizzy, this guy named Peter. And I've reached out to him and I've told him I've used his idea. But back then he took two big TV sets and put them at 90-degree angles to each other, like you see back here. And he put a window between them at a 45-degree angle, like you see
right
here. And so it was like a half reflective. The camera would then look at these two monitors and see the top monitor through the glass and see the reflection of the bottom monitor in the reflection of that glass. And so that I decided to do that method, and I built a wooden structure to hold these two monitors, one like this, where the camera looks straight at it, and one like this, and then the glass like this. And I started with just a sheet of glass, and it really wasn't working. And after trying tinting, like you would tint a window, like a car window, which cut down the light a lot, I ended up going with teleprompter glass, which is kind of expensive. I didn't really have that much money to mess around with, but I got these samples, like a little piece about this big that was like $14 just to sample it. So I was using that for a while until I got the bigger piece. But what this does is allows either 60-40 is the standard amount of light. So you're looking at your teleprompter, and the camera's seeing your face basically, but you're seeing the words reflected on the glass.
Oh, sure, yeah.
But I got this 50-50 glass. So the camera is looking through, and half the light is coming out of the monitor into the camera, and half the light is from the reflection of the bottom monitor. And both monitors are displaying the same image from the camera. One is just kind of being folded in a mirror image way. And that's what creates these intricate fractals and this kind of crazy emergent behavior. But what at first I thought it's not going to work, and I was like, well, maybe I can just do stills with it, because the feedback was just dissipating so quickly. I realized I had to go into the camera and turn up the brightness. Turn up the sharpness some, or else it just, because these DSLRs, they have such a flat image. Because they don't apply any, especially if you have it like in a neutral, like a profile. You like apply the sharpness in post. Yeah. So I had to turn up the sharpness. I brought up the contrast in the camera. I brought up the saturation, and then things started to kind of not disappear so quickly. And I started to get, well, let me go back to the first images I was starting to get. First here.
Yeah, while you pull that up, I'd love to ask you too, and please continue to pull it up though. I'm
ready
want.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah, you can pull it up now. I was going to ask you, as you're setting it up, the one of the things I was wondering about is, well, one, you just seem like you're very self-motivated to like have this. It's like as a passion project. I'm quite impressed that you were able to like move past all these kind of obstacles that keep coming up in terms of and just like create solutions to them and around them. And even the like your light herder project, you call it the God machine. I've seen you use that before. That in itself, what's cool is like you're creating a work of art, but you also created a work of art in the machine. Like it's a beautiful structure. You have the wood, the colors, it all looks really nice, and it wouldn't have to. I mean, you could have just had all the wires coming out and it kind of looking, not so great. There it is. So folks can see, and I can, Dave, afterwards, I can overlay some stuff in our conversation that'll help, I think, illustrate some stuff you're talking about, because I think the visuals help a lot. So as you're talking about.
It is pretty hard to grasp what I'm saying.
Trying to describe what it is, or just showing it and be like, okay, now I get it. Yeah. So with your permission, I'd love to like, even if I just overlay some of your work and have it just over some of the stuff you even said earlier. I can just have it overlaid so people have something to sort of base it off of. But yeah, please show us here.
Well, what you're saying about how it looks.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. So I did want it to look nice kind of as an art piece itself. That's why I called it like the video feedback kinetic sculpture at first, which it's not really a kinetic sculpture, but I couldn't think of a better way of describing it. But it has a lot of elements that I would change now. And I'm actually just about to start probably disassembling this and making a new one, because in October, I have a show at the Palm Beach Cultural Council, which it's an art space. And I want it to kind of be a little more refined. I mean, this looks kind of cool. It's got very rough and big chunks of 2x4s, but I want to make it out of like a nice wood, like an oak or something. I want to have it more of a lighter blonde color maybe, and a little more furniture kind of aesthetic, and less. I mean, it'll still look basically the same. It's going to be kind of these triangle shapes with something with a tube on it and the monitors on it, but it's just going to be a little more refined looking, and maybe the wires will be hid a little bit better. Also, you see this? Do you see the wooden monitor structure here? That's already been replaced with these metal monitor structures you can see here.
Sure.
And I did that because I needed more space, because I wanted to put two next to each other. Which is a whole other, like, I haven't even gotten into like the whole like mixing, like getting into the more complicated fractals, but two would not fit next to each other in this big chunky one. So I built it out of T-slot metal construction, which is like a big erector set, which is really fun to work with. But so here you can see them right there.
Oh yeah.
Here they are.
Is there anything else like this? I tried to find, it's actually funny because, I mean, video feedback I think is so interesting in a lot of different ways. And you touched on it a little bit as to your interest. It's sort of sparking your interest back, going back to high school with Hofstadter's Godel, Escher, Bach. which we discussed a little bit on our call a couple of days ago, which is a fascinating book, and I recommend anyone that's interested in, I mean, theories of everything / paradoxes,
Recursive,
recursiveness,
self-referential.
Gödel's incompleteness, paradoxes of self-reference, etc. You have to check it out. And what I loved about that book, and what I was surprised by, and I mentioned this to you on the phone the other day too, was how little actually it's in that book. Like, I think it's only, he mentions it a couple times. It's not even, you can't even find it in the appendix. Like, video feedback's not even in the appendix, so it's not even a major enough topic to make it there. But there is like a 2-page sequence of images that Hofstadter includes, that has stuff that's generated from video feedback that looks like space-time dynamics, things like spiral galaxies forming, things. And I mean, so it's funny, and I think what what piques people's interests about this, and in part yours and mine too, what I see is that I look at this and it's got characteristics that remind me of things like biological organisms, like bacteria and like mitosis, etc. And then also things that can apply to the largest structures in the universe, things that are similar enough, right? So whenever I see something that can generate, set quasi-randomly, in and out of your control, and yet it's giving you these a wide array, I should say, of phenomena. It makes me think that there's something more here, right? Do you get that intuition?
When you're making this, you definitely get the idea there's something more, especially when you're dealing with the more of the fractal nature with something like this, where you see leaves and definitely you see arteries, and so yeah, with just the straight video feedback, you definitely get like a bar galaxy, or cell membranes. You see cells coming off of each other, like a mitosis, or and that's one of the things that it's really hard when you're doing the feedback. Getting these broad things swirling around is kind of easy. It's when you start to get things interacting with each other, like a blob moving between things, or like these things separating. That's like when I'm always trying to get, and you're trying to make something interesting happen. So, but anyway, I don't know if you saw this quote here, but I contacted Hofstadter, and then I also contacted Heinz Otto Hedegen. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. He was the one who took Mandelbrot's like fractal equation and put it into a computer and made the first computer images using that equation. It was like on the cover of Omni magazine, like in the early 80s. It was like when the fractals became a known thing. I remember seeing that on Omni magazine.
Wow, very cool.
So he's a protege of Mandelbrot. But so here I'll show you the first. This website chronicles kind of like everything along the way, and then I have a link to the my Tumblr that chronicles even more, and you can look at the reverse chronology or forward chronology of every step, like every trip to Home Depot. And this was like during the height of COVID, and that's basically, this was my COVID project, and it was kind of like but so every trip, you're walking around and like, am I going to die going to this, getting this lumber? But here, this was, do you see this image here?
Yeah.
That's in 2007, my idea for the HD video feedback kinetic sculpture, and someone sits in it, and that never really happened, but oh, now I lost. Hello. Well, that's annoying. Okay, so here's the first incarnation of this device with just one monitor. So this is before it became a fractal generator, but kind of the first images that I made that were sustainable after I got the sharpness turned up. So you can see it has kind of a liney nature to it. And those lines help the image remain visible without kind of just dissolving into nothingness. So here, I'm actually doing some audio looping with a little audio device on the audio here, but here's you could kind of see the cell-like cell membranes.
Yeah, that's really
Galaxies.
cool.
So this is the stuff that you're really writing the controls to try to keep that. It wants to disappear in the middle there, or it wants to go too bright. So it's a little disappearing. Then I'm really cranking up the brightness. You see I cranked it up, and that's when it got bright again. Then you kind of bring it back down.
Yeah.
And it's about not overreacting, and you really don't want it to disappear. See, it almost disappeared there, but I kind of saved it. It's all this like little kind of game that you're playing, and see how long you can get something going, like a good run before it goes away.
Riding a wave.
This was a pretty long run, but really not that interesting in the end. But then, well, here's one that's kind of here. I'm kind of writing the controls to try to keep these two shapes interacting with each other. And this is before the fractal glass.
Yeah.
So when I see something like this, I try to play with it and have them kind of maybe talk to each other or create something between them. But then when I got here's like a bar galaxy, still before the glass. So it's like those galaxies that put out radiation from from the each end of it.
Is there a community around this? Like, what's the? I'm sure there's many hobbyists that work on this, but a
lot of people do video feedback, but I've never seen a contraption like this. I've seen something that will hold a camera, but not that because part of this is that the human interaction, and I'm part of the feedback loop because I'm moving, and you'll see that more. This was when I first got the glass, and it's before I had this is the cheaper glass, and it's not as refined, but you could see here now you have this plant shape, and I'm moving back and forth, so I'm interacting with the image, so I'm part of the feedback loop myself. And then so here I started messing around with getting an image. Here's with my phone off the screen and mixing that image. It's kind of a game changer when I bought a switcher, like this Roland switcher that can mix in images. But I think this is all before that happened here. So here you have not just the image, but the image from the phone mixed in with the image. And so you have the repeating, you have the feedback, the main feedback, and then that main feedback repeated throughout for an even more complicated look. But then when I got the glass much better, and I got everything kind of figured out. It made this kind of underwater creature shape.
Yeah.
And there's a creature that I can't remember what it's called right now, but it kind of looks like this. So it's kind of whip-like, and that's because the images there's still a delay as it goes through. The camera puts out HDMI, and these monitors only take SDI inputs, and so you have to convert. There's a little box you can get from Blackmagic, and so that takes a fraction of a second to do. So there's delay there. There's delays in many places, but that's why the tail whips like this, because the motion of me moving the camera and rotating it is propagating down the line like a whip. And there's ways of adding even more delay that I do with another box that changes it from another from 60p to 30. But these also only take an interlace signal, so because they're old, and so some of the cameras I have only put out a P, so you have to transfer to I. Okay, so then I got the switcher. So this switcher allows you to switch between, like I said, talking about before, where you switch between that dog and the feedback. So here I could switch between an image that I was getting from the output from the phone, although it could come from anywhere. It could come from another camera. It could come from any source that has an output of an image. And you could either key this image over feedback, and that's like when you put your finger over the feedback and the feedback moves around your finger, or you could switch between the image and the feedback, and that image, camera sees the image and it sees it as feedback and it goes into feedback. So here's the first playing around with that, and it's just a simple shape of this flower, just a still of a flower from the phone. And you could see that shape from before, that kind of underwater shape, but now it's being made up of this flower. And you can see how it, like I was saying before, how it's propagating. You can see that flower going down the line. That's exactly why that tail is whipping around, because of that delay.
Right. Would you say this? Oh yeah. Would you say this machine is the light herder? And I know people oftentimes try to be humble, but is this the greatest video feedback generator in the world? Would you say?
Oh, definitely. I would say definitely.
Yeah. I mean, that's like incredible. If we might just like sit on that for a moment, that what you've made, I haven't seen anything like this. And I mean, obviously, I've done web searches, and I don't know. I really don't know this community that well, to be honest. Like, I don't know. It's kind of hard to find. I'm surprised. Yeah.
People have done a lot of video feedback, and there's a kind of a crossover with kind of a glitch artist in video feedback. And but I've never seen anything that incorporates human movement like this. People have done video feedback fractals before. That's nothing new. You can do it with a computer. You can do it with many different ways, but I've not seen it have this organic motion. Or have the complexity, because like life that these images look like, the device has evolved in an organic way also. Because the way it is now, I would never say, okay, I'm going to build it like this, like the human body. You wouldn't build a human body from scratch like it is. It's because of the iterations over time. So I kept adding things. So that the next thing I added, because see here, this flower, it's kind of boring because it's very static,
right?
Except for when it goes into feedback. But otherwise, the flower, it's kind of hard to show with this, but see here, the flower is, when it's visible, it's not rotating or doing anything. It's just sitting there. So I wanted to have an organic way to incorporate motion in this second image. So I came up with this idea of rotating that image with the main camera. So I put another dowel in, and it was tough to try to figure out how to, like the mechanics of rotating two dowels. I mean, I used a Van de Graaff belt, and the rotation was pretty easy, but how to make them also move forwards and backwards was a little trickier. But here, this was the first time. Here you'll see, not only do I have a screen where you could have that flower on, the way it works is the camera looks at a screen and the screen moves, and that's what makes the motion in the second object. Or there's a screen under here, or you could key something.
Interesting. Yeah.
So
that's pretty cool.
So here you could see they both rotate at the same time, and they move by the forward and backward motion is transferred using a piece of wood between them. And then I don't use screws now, I use a piece of tape, but it catches on that. So it can rotate, but it can also move the two at the same time.
Yeah. That's really cool.
And so here, the image on the screen, like the flower from before, it moves, but you get this with these weird behaviors, because I'd then later put not just a flower on that screen, but I replaced that monitor that was a cheap monitor with another one of these, and brought the control box up front, so I can do feedback on the secondary image. So now the thing influencing the feedback is another feedback loop. So the fractal,
Gotcha.
well, here it is. Before I did the feedback, it's just with the word fractal coming from the phone. And you can see when I start moving this, start rotating, the word moves, but not just in a random way. It moves in the way that the feedback is moving, and that's moving at the same time and in the same way.
Wow. Very impressive. What do you, so this is fascinating. It's very, very interesting. And I recommend, I'll link in the description, Dave, this page so people can go through and, dive into the nitty gritty stuff. I mean, because it's awesome. And thank you for putting it out there and having it available to people. So one of the things I'd love to know, if you could, and maybe, let's say someone this has kind of piqued someone's interest into actually doing this themselves. Let's say someone wants to get their hands dirty out there. Let's say they don't have, I mean, you obviously you're a builder, you can do stuff with your hands, you're able to create stuff. Let's say someone has, a limited budget, they have a phone, they have, they can maybe buy a couple small things, but how would you recommend someone get into this? Maybe if they wanted to try it out on their own?
Well, you can make video feedback with any kind of camcorder or your phone. You get a little HDMI converter from your phone that goes to the screen of your TV set. And then you just point it at the TV and you just move it around, but you won't be able to really do the fun stuff. So I would say if you want to start messing around with it, go find an old TV set, like go to the flea market or look online or something, one that has RCA inputs, that not so old that it doesn't have RCA inputs, but it has those knobs. And then you find an old camcorder that you could get one of those really cheap that has RCA out, and get a cheap tripod and just put the camera right in front of the TV, take the output of the camera, put it into the TV set and put it at a little angle and focus it, turn off the lights, and then start playing with the knobs of the TV, start playing with the iris on the camera to get an image. But first, when you set up the camera and the TV, make sure that you see that TV and the TV and the TV. So when you're seeing the room and stuff on your TV, and then you go over and you see the TV set, make sure you're actually seeing that kind of effect. And then you move the camera closer or zoom the camera in. And that could be done pretty cheaply. It will take a little, searching around for that kind of TV set. Or if you just want to play around, like your webcam, all you have to do is move it around and point it at your TV monitor or your computer monitor. And there's also computer programs that do online video feedback. That's kind of a simulation of a camera looking at a monitor.
Oh, where do you find that? I haven't come across any of those.
I could send you a link. It's harder to do because it's less of that like immediate interaction between it with those knobs.
But I'll send that. Well, after this call, we can. I'd love to get my hands on that, because one of the things with some of my videos, whenever I come across, say, a web tool or an applet or a game, Java, sometimes people put together stuff together that people can actually touch and play with. Like that could be a fun thing for some people in this audience to get their hands dirty a little bit, play around with it. Maybe it'll pique their interest to take the next step to then go, oh, let me hook up my phone to the input for my computer and play around with that. And because I'm sure, I mean, do you ever have, I don't know, friends or family to play around with the machine, with the light herder? Like, do you have folks try it out? And if so, what do people say?
It was at an exhibit for a while where people could come up and and play. And I think most people, and maybe listening to me talking today, have kind of no concept of what I'm talking about. But as soon as you put your hand on it and you turn it and you see the the image move, or you
Hmm.
see that when you move back and you see it receding like that, it's really becomes intuitive
Yep.
at more than it is listening to someone talk about it. It's kind of ridiculous trying to explain in words video feedback, or even
That's
looking at it.
okay. Yeah, yeah. You
But
do
even
your
looking,
best. Oh, yeah.
even looking at it's hard to conceive what's going on, because it kind
Yeah.
of looks like a computer is making it or something.
Mm,
But as soon as you just point your camera at the screen and you move like this, and it becomes obvious what's going on. And I think it's cool for anyone to just see even the basic thing of pointing your webcam at your computer monitor,
mm,
and putting your hand in there and seeing your hand move around. This is something people have done a lot, is installations where you can walk in front of a camera and you
mhm.
can kind of move around, and you become part of the feedback.
Right. That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So depends on how into this someone wants to be. I think for like a kid who wants to have a project,
Yeah.
go to flea markets and find a TV set and an old camera. I think that's a perfect kind of a project for like a 10-year-old or something.
Yeah. Play around with
And
it for a while. See
and
what you
if you
can
want
make.
to do something more complicated, you could find monitors like this online. And
Hmm.
there's an article in Make magazine that goes through step by step on how to build the first iteration, like the simple iteration
Oh,
of this device.
I gotta look for that. Okay. Make
Yeah.
magazine. I'll look for that. What's interesting about the technology, this is maybe something to give us some context on, is it's funny as technology improves,
Uh-huh.
generally as things get crisper, as like options, as the analog knobs go away and everything's kind
Yeah.
of built in, it's almost as if it's harder to do video feedback than it might have been 20, 30 years ago. Is that accurate?
Well, definitely, because
Yeah.
at a time when everyone had a TV with those knobs, anyone who had a camera could just
Yeah.
start doing video feedback like I was doing in college.
Yeah.
And then by 2003, even, it was rare to see one of those TVs. 2007, I took a little searching at the flea market, and now I'm sure you could find one, because the online stuff is so easy to find. It might even be easier now.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, sure. So was there like a golden age of video feedback? Was there like a period where this stuff? Because much of my research, most of the stuff I could find was things that looked very dated. I mean, they may have been done recently on old equipment, but it all looks like it's stuff from the 70s, 80s. Like, there's a really a retro vibe to a lot of it.
yeah.
Yours is, I think, the stuff that you do with Lighthearter, the God Machine, is an exception in that, it looks super high quality and yet has a lot of the techniques you would have find in older stuff. Found in older stuff.
Right. I think, well, my stuff is definitely the first HD video feedback that's been made using knobs.
Hmm.
A lot of people have made HD feedback just by pointing an HD camera at something. But so that's why it looks a lot, it's got the 16:9 aspect ratio. But as far as like the standard from years ago, there's this one video. It was posted 8 years ago, but I think it was probably made in the 80s. Here, I'll do a screen share. It's like one of the first videos that comes up when you do a video search for video feedback.
Hmm.
And you can see it's very much like the liney stuff I did. Do you see that?
Yeah.
No. So this guy, and you could find things like this. People have, I would say, like the 80s and the 70s were big for video feedback.
Hmm.
If the more you look, you could see it in older videos. You could see like that whole thing where the finger in front of the TV, where it becomes part of the feedback. You could see in old MTV videos where they're on blue screen, and
Yeah.
you could see them replicated, like going off into the distance as they move move in the
Right.
feedback behind them.
Yeah, yeah.
So it can be really cheesy.
Yeah.
It's one of the cheesier, simpler effects that you can see. Doctor Who, I think it's in the opening.
The intro, right?
Yeah, the intro.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it's
it's
classic.
one of the go-to effects from years ago.
Yeah, it's really cool. I
Yeah.
hope it comes back. I hope it makes a return. The one thing is like, and actually at the start of the call, you said you made a connection between that and like the audio feedback. You know, when you have like a hot mic, and I know you have sometimes you overlay music onto the video feedback. I was watching an interview that was done with Mike Hall on Dead Air Live. Like I think it was an interview he did a long time ago. We were talking about how he was doing video feedback at a concert. Like it was just a live video feedback along with the music, but the bass of the music was moving the machine. So that the vibrations were influencing the art. So it was like in real time, you were getting both this video feedback and the music was like is pulsating through the music.
That's something I had this show in Colorado, and I wanted to that I worked with an audio artist, and he was doing kind of audio loops. I wanted to have the audio affect the feedback, and I built this thing. I'll show you.
Because it gets me thinking, like how many forms of feedback can you include at once, right? Like, can you get how many sensory experiences can you like incorporate in this loopiness?
Exactly. Here, I called it the wiggler. So I wanted to have the sound that either I made or he made shake a mirror that shook the input to the device. And I didn't get a chance to use it because I didn't have enough time to set it up. But here, do you see that?
I do see it, yeah.
So that's me shaking. This is another self-referential thing. I'm shaking the device that's making the shaking sound. So there's a bass. I bought a subwoofer and I cut it open and I put a piece of stretchy rubber on the front and a mirror. And so as I actually took the speaker, I ripped the speaker apart. So it was just the speaker part had a stick poking at the mirror. And so the camera is looking at the output. The camera, it's a feedback loop that it's seeing in a monitor through the reflection of the mirror that's being shaken. So you're seeing the device that's making the shaking. That's kind of what you were talking about, where the guy's bass was influencing the feedback.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was some weirdness.
Sure.
Stop sharing.
This is a very abstract question, but so this is going to come from left field. But you spent so many hours, you know, like with Lighthearter over the decades, playing around with video feedback. Is there anything from the process of creating this stuff? Do you feel like you can understand things about? It's going to sound very metaphysical, but about reality, about the universe, about things. You know how, like, if you've ever heard this analogy, like if you go to the beach and you wash and you just stand there and watch the waves crash against the shore, you can kind of intuit something like something magical or something. You take yourself out of the experience. You're kind of with it. I know this is potentially getting very woo-woo right now, but my intention is that, when you're out maybe in nature, you have these kinds of experiences where you just kind of experience something. But in this case, you're in the act of creating it. Is there anything that you pull out from that I would say lessons so concretely, but I know it's a kind of a very vague prompt, but if I know what I'm trying to get at here is there's anything that you've taken from it that you maybe you've incorporated in your day-to-day life or things you think you understand better because of it?
Well, you definitely start to see things in nature that catch your eye and it looks like something you've made with video feedback, or it looks very fractal. You see the fractals in nature more, and you can see like the tree, and you can really understand how it's like that fractal nature. As far as like philosophies, I don't even know. I don't think it's helped me in life any, but I've thought more deeply about kind of like consciousness, because this whole idea of things being created with iterations and emergent behavior, I think has a lot to do with consciousness. And I have this kind of idea of, when I was talking about that image of the dog being caught in the wires and it wasn't coming from the tape deck anymore, it was just kind of zooming around in there. And if some alien from another planet came down and wanted to figure out where this image of the dog came from, and they started like taking apart the mechanics and looking at the wires, and as soon as they disconnected just for a moment that loop, that the dog would be gone forever. And no matter how they put it back together again or reconnect that loop, that pattern is gone. It's kind of like when I showed that feedback being started with the spark of light, and it perpetuates itself. If you put your hand in front of the lens and you go like this, it's black again. So that kind of spark is life, and that hand moving in front is kind of death. And it's the pattern that is, I think, is the consciousness in a person's brain, not the like my analogy with the aliens looking at the wires. It's kind of like, no matter how much you open up the brain and you look at the neurons, or how the neurons are even wired, if you can get down to the very fine detail of how every neuron was talking to every other neuron, and you can map that out. Like if you thought maybe you can replicate a person by doing that somehow, by doing an exact replica of each neuron, I don't think you would replicate that person, because it's the pattern that flourishes from, you know, from the beginning, from two cells that the pattern is building,
right?
And then it builds through builds complexity to make a human consciousness and a human being. I think that if you just assembled a brain, you wouldn't have that pattern that's in there. It would take the iterations to build that pattern. Now, if you could somehow map the pattern, maybe you could replicate the person's consciousness, but not just the wires. So this is what I'm thinking about when people say, like, what happens if you die or something, where do you go? I'm thinking, where did that pattern of the video feedback go when you blocked the light? It didn't go anywhere. The pattern stopped being a pattern. All the wires are there of the camera, and all the setup is exactly the same, but the pattern doesn't exist anymore. Like, where does the pattern of a snowflake go when the snowflake melts? It's just not a pattern anymore. So I think that's my philosophy. So that's kind of more of a general thing with video feedback.
Yeah,
I
like that. That's really cool. Is that also above your right shoulder? Is that Ouroboros painting, or what is that?
Oh, that's a flamingo.
Oh, it's a flamingo in the circle. Yeah, I just can't see the top of it.
Hard to move the camera, but
that's okay. No, yeah, don't. That's just the red. The red. It just looked like an Ouroboros symbol, which I'm drawn towards. But I can't see the top of it. That's why.
A lot of this art is my girlfriend's, but
oh, nice.
This is that's the flamingo's legs.
Oh, gotcha.
So I know there were some other things I wanted to. Oh, do you mind if I show like one of the most complex iterations? One of the images that.
Yeah,
kind of like
absolutely.
Here. Oh. With the two monitor structures next to each other, instead of having like an image of a dog influencing the feedback, or a feedback loop influencing the feedback, with the second monitor structure, I have a fractal influencing the other fractal. So it's like one fractal set can be made up of another fractal set, completely different fractal set. And they can, the two monitor structures, one can influence one side, the other can influence the other side, but you get some really crazy things that happen. And this is something new. I mean, it's many months old, but it's new as far as me playing around with it. The two can influence each other. So the one monitor structure can influence, like monitor structure 2 can influence 1, while 1 is influencing 2. So you get this feedback loop between the structures, and you get this kind of like crazy super feedback that happens. And you see this kind of in this video. I'll point out when it's happening, but here you have this logo that a company gave me a discount on some of these monitors to make a little video. And so you can see this is very simple. Here's like one fractal made from another. Okay, I'll show you when the two influencing each other happens. Kind of right there. Here. It kind of devolves into madness very quickly.
Yeah.
So you see the main feedback loop, and then on the outsides are other feedback loops, kind of part of the main feedback loop. Anyway, that's like the most complicated iteration of the device.
Yeah. That's so cool.
Let me stop sharing that.
Very
what
nice. Yeah, I mean it's a fascinating area, and I feel like I did try to look for some research around it. Like I feel like it's been studied a little bit. James Crutchfield wrote a paper about space-time dynamics in video feedback that I read. But there's really not so much like say scientific work, but yeah, like a real critical, because these are system dynamics, right? There's complexity in here. There's emergent patterns that are coming about. Feels like it's rife for study, for even like the organization, let's say, of various patterns. I don't know if are you familiar at all with cellular automata?
Oh, is that the game of life kind of thing?
Yes, yeah. Game of life is a classic example of that. Basically, yeah, you have structures that they play by certain rules, and they have they sort of generate complexity, and it's
very much like that.
Yeah, it's very much like that. I did find something about that, how like dynamics of cellular automata, the dynamics of cellular automata are governed by local rules, but video feedback allows for the simulation of non-local autonoma. So video feedback has this like extra potential or extra dimension that's possible there. So it's funny to me that, and I think cellular automata are very interesting. I think that's a great area of complexity. I did a video on the edge of chaos, which is a concept of the metastable zone between order and disorder, where where a lot of interesting stuff happens. These things that are, it's got the lowest stability in a system, but the highest potential for the emergence of some kind of like transformational structures that occur. And that has to do with like things like Stephen Wolfram's different classes of automata, which class 4, I believe, are in the edge of chaos zone and region. And then things like we get from evolution, like biological evolution seems to be optimized around that edge. And I'm sure if you looked at these interesting structures in video feedback, it'd probably be around that edge where this kind of interesting structures kind of develop. So the fact that cellular automata are very popular, or let's say I have to imagine that many more people know about cellular automata than video feedback. But video feedback is just as interesting to me. You know what I mean? Like it's I feel like the amount of study around it, and maybe that's because it's a little bit harder to analyze. There's just like a lot more randomness potentially. There's all these factors that you've alluded to of different knobs of control that you have. So maybe it's just because it's harder to study, but I think
it's not really replicatable exactly, but I think I've always thought that someone should really study this, and it turns out maybe it's me, I don't know, but
yeah, maybe.
but there's really something important going on with it. When you're messing around with it, you can really get that sense. And with the game of life, you can set the rules very specifically. It's a little more like analog with the feedback, but I think that those rules still apply. The rules would be like how the camera is rotated, the distance from the screen, how much brightness there is, the sharpness. These are like the rules of the universe, and the behavior follows those rules. And I feel like that's kind of, I feel the kind of the whole universe, it has the rules, like how cells, how atoms react, like behave around each other. That has all these rules of physics, and once you set those rules and they exist, you kind of like just say, okay, go forth and make things, and you'll get galaxies and suns and planets and people, and they just develop through the iterations. Like, you don't need anything except the initial rules. You don't need to have someone say, make a galaxy or make a sun or make an aardvark. They'll just come about. Like when you set up the rules of the feedback system, you get a certain shape.
It's pretty interesting stuff, and I think it is one of the best illustrations of what like Hofstadter was getting at with Godel, Escher, Bach, right? This one of the things I love in terms of trying to help people understand this stuff. I mean, concepts in general, anything in education, when you can see it visually and you can see it in motion, and even to your point before, when you can play with it yourself, you're just going to be able to understand this far better than anyone can try to explain it to you, right? You need the firsthand experience of actually doing it. Well, I will say your videos are really well produced in that, beautifully shot. I love the fog that comes in with the machine and the lighting, and you got the handles, and it's really nicely polished and well edited.
Thanks. I was accused of someone as being a corporation using it for some kind of advertising because it was too polished. But
oh wow.
I will say that there are hardcore video feedback people that have said this is not good because video feedback is supposed to be meditative and have slow music, and I decided to put some kind of less meditative music on some of these things, and some people are offended by that, but you know how people are online. But if you look at other people talking about video feedback, I've read people saying that they look at it and get an idea or a sense that there's something important going on with it, something with the universe that is. And what I was thinking about saying before was that more about what you're talking about on the edges of things, where interesting things happen on the edge of things. It really is in this middle space and gray zone where these interesting things happen between. If you just pump up the brightness and you just have this big bright blob, or if it's too dark and goes away, it's right on that edge of death and life, where things start kind of talking to each other and start interacting with each other. It's kind of like a light switch. It's either on or off, but it's not really either on and off, because you can put it right in the middle, and if you're gentle enough, you can make it where that switch is just between on and off, and the lights will go right. And that's the interesting thing that happens between the vast space of like nothingness before it was warm enough to have interesting things go on, like right now, and the vast space of time that will be after things have cooled down and there won't be anything interesting going on. And we're like right in the middle, like we are living like in this, in a moment in a vast explosion. Like people talk about like the Big Bang had happened or something, but no, it's still happening. We're right in the middle of this interesting part where it's going to be finished at some point and there won't be anything moving. We're at like basically at this fraction of a moment where if you could zoom back and have a different time perspective, and you could see just an explosion and you could freeze it for just an instant, and you could look and you could expand that nanosecond into a billion years, and you can all that's happening of life and people and planets and go into the grocery store and all that little minute things that's happening in the middle of this explosion where interesting things are going on because we're right in that sweet zone, just like the video feedback, right in that sweet zone, interesting things happen. So it's all about the middle space.
Yeah. Wow. I agree. That was a nice encapsulation. A really nice explanation. That's so cool. Well, where can people, find out more? Like, I'll link to all your stuff in the description, your website, your blog, your channels, your Vimeo channel, your YouTube channel. Anywhere else people are those best places to find you?
Well, the lighthearter.com, and it has links to everything. There's even like at the bottom of the page, there's like a link to like all sorts of unrelated things. So if you keep scrolling, like if I figured if someone is really interested and they're devoted enough to get to the bottom, they would be interested in seeing other things. But I have other weirdness, machine learning weirdness that I've started experimenting with it before, kind of it way back 2 years ago.
Yeah, a long time ago.
But there's this program called Visions of Chaos, where this guy has this. I recommend checking it out. It's a free program, and it has all these modules that are just these math modules, these simulation modules. Even before he got into artificial intelligence, machine learning, it's worth looking at. To use the machine learning modules takes a lot of installing things and going through his checklist, and it takes up a lot of space. But I started using that before you could do it just on a browser, and so I have some AI art stuff that kind of goes on forever and progresses through. It took like 3 weeks to render out because I was doing it locally on my computer.
Yeah, and
I kind of wrote to him and asked if I can have some way of controlling how you go through these images, so you can kind of put in numbers to change the rotation and change the moving and around and stuff. And so it's all this very detailed writing out of like little move a little bit this way, move a little that way through all these like it's not user friendly at all, but it looks different. It's much more rudimentary than these Dolly images and things like that you see now, or kind of the even the moving images of this AI art. None of it looks quite like this stuff. It's not stable diffusion. It's the stuff before that has its own unique look. So there's that. I have some audio kind of weirdness that uses a lot of looping also, and that's on my SoundCloud. So you can maybe give that link. I'll send that to you.
Yeah, send that to me, please. I haven't seen that yet.
Okay.
That'd be awesome.
Cool. Well, this was wonderful. I really appreciate it, Dave. I learned a lot. I'm sure the audience, a lot of folks, might be their first introduction to video feedback, the first stuff that they've seen. So I'd love to overlay this with maybe some of your videos, including like all your links and everything, just so people can see your work. And I recommend to folks who are interested in this stuff to get your hands dirty and try it out. I'd love to see definitely that site that you mentioned where you're able to sort of do stuff with maybe a browser, maybe it's a program where people can test it out, just because I think that'd be a good way for people to get started working with.
I'll send that off. So
yeah. Cool.
Okay, well, this was fun,
thanks, Dave.
and I talked longer than I thought I would. I hope I didn't talk too much.
I told you. I told you we weren't going to go over. No,
Yeah.
this is wonderful. Yeah, I really appreciate it, Dave, and I'm a big fan of your work.
Thank you. I look forward
amazing. Yeah, sorry.
I look forward to looking at more of your interviews too.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that very much. And as I said, like in the middle of the conversation, I mean, unless someone's hiding a machine out there in the world, you have the world's greatest video feedback machine. You're the constructor of that, which is so amazing. It's so cool. And
I am going to recreate this with nicer wood, and that's kind of more of a mechanical and a construction thing. But I would like to do this in 4K at some point, Right now, it's about as impossible to do as HD was in 2007 because 4K monitors, once again, the ones with knobs are $150,000, whatever. So someday it'll be possible to do this in 4K. And I think that things will look even more lifelike and more interesting. But if anyone wants to help to do that, there's a Kickstarter or something somewhere. So I'll give you the link to that. If there happens to be some kind of rich benefactor who wants to donate a few $100,000.
We'll try to find them. If I know anybody, I'll tell them.
Okay,
great. Well, thanks, Dave.
All right. Thank you very much.
It was awesome.